Welcome to the All of Life podcast from Redemption Church Tempe, where we have conversations on faith, culture, theology, and beyond to help us live all of life, all for Jesus. Let's jump into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the All of Life podcast. My name is Warren Williams, and I'm actually going to be your host today. And today I'm joined by John Crawford, our pastor of communities.
Yo, yo.
And usually I would introduce the ladies first, but I wanted to save the best for last and introduce Autumn Matney, who is one of our designers here at Redemption Tempe. And so if you've seen all the beautiful hand lettering and some of the graphic design that's been we've used as a church, Autumn has had a major hand in that. And so, Autumn, we are really happy to have you on our podcast today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So today, I'm sure you can imagine when you look around, we just ooze creativity and art, artistry. And so I'm sure if you, maybe if you're not watching this, you're like, what is he even talking about? Today, we're going to be talking about the creational good of art and creativity. We're going to be reflecting on how the gospel implicates art and creativity. And man, if you've hung around Redemption Tempe for any number of time, you know artists and creativity make up a large part of the life of our church, and so it's a topic and a thing that we always want to think through and think about and just reflect on. It's how does the gospel speak to it, right? Like where do we see art mattering through the biblical story, and so. Before we get into that, though, like I said, we do have artists around the table. And so what I would like to hear, just to get us started off today, is, Autumn, you could start us off. Like, what is your favorite piece of art or your favorite medium of art? I know you are a talented artist, and you probably are going to say one of the things that you do, but I'll be curious to hear, is there something else that you really enjoy artistically?
Yeah, like Warren said, I do a lot of different things, but I think my favorite medium of art is actually oil painting, which I haven't done in probably 5 or 6 years. It's a little bit harder of a medium to get into just because there's a lot of setup time and there's a lot of drying time and things like that. But that's my favorite medium to work with.
Gotcha.
Probably second to that would be painting directly on walls, like with house paint, so doing like murals and things like that. And then what I was thinking about coming into this day was just like some of the eras in art history that I appreciate the most. And so I don't know if you're wanting to go there with that, but
you can tell us. I mean, you'll probably be educating us because my art history experience was more of me sleeping through the classes. So I need to learn. I need to learn how to appreciate art. So
when I opened my eyes from my nap in art history when they were talking about Degas, he was my favorite impressionist is Degas. So if you can think of like the ballerinas, that's one of my favorite things to go back and look at. So that's the end of my lesson. It was a short one.
No,
there it is.
That's good. That's good. And Autumn is working on some beautiful murals actually here on campus. And so if you come by the Redemption Tempe campus and you swing by the back porch area, there's going to be a beautiful mural that's going up there that Autumn is kind of leading up. And so
it's looking good.
Yeah, stay tuned. It should be done in a few weeks. So if you see it now, it's a little bit janky, but
yeah, it's going to be beautiful. John, what about you, man? What is your favorite piece of art or your favorite medium of art?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a hairdresser, so I love the art of hairdressing, specifically cutting hair. It's similar to sculpting, right? That's like hair color is kind of similar to painting.
Right.
Hair cutting, hairdressing is similar to sculpting. So that would be my favorite to do, but my favorite actual kind of medium of art would be tattoo art. And so, most people don't know.
Do you have any tattoos?
Yeah.
Just like one, right? Like a little one.
Most people don't know, but I'm pretty heavily tattooed. Even thinking of it as how you collect art pieces.
Sure.
I would say that I'm a tattoo collector and collector of various artist pieces on my body.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I've seen some of your tattoos, man. It's pretty rad, dude. So
yeah.
Cool. I would say for me, my favorite medium of art, I think the easy go-to is music for me. I think music, and I also like visual art, paintings and that sort of stuff. I don't know much of the history about it, but actually, you know what? I was wrong. I like visual art, but my favorite visual art is actually graffiti because of the story behind it, right? Like graffiti art is the result of, in many cases, of like school programs and art programs being cut, and then you have like this desire still to create, and you know, even as you try to like stifle that or push it down, our urge and desire to create just has to come out, and so people, you don't give them a canvas, then the wall becomes their canvas, and so I really have come to learn and appreciate graffiti art. Not that I'm like saying that it's all good. I know there's things behind that, but you know. Yeah.
There's a lot of beauty in it, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of beauty in it. Yeah. There's a lot of beauty in it. All right, so with any of these sort of things, like any topic that we discuss on this podcast, whether it's sports or art or whatever it may be, we always want to like build off of a biblical vision of art or of whatever the topic is. So today, as we're discussing art and creativity, John, why do arts matter? Where do we see the theme of art throughout the biblical story?
Yeah. So starting in Genesis 1, we see that God is the creator. He's the creator of everything. Another fancy way of saying that is he is the artist, the supreme artist. Yeah. The world is his canvas. He has created art in and of his creation by creating the world and everything in it. And so I think from the very get-go, beginning of the biblical story, we see that God is the artist, his identity. But then also wrapped up into Genesis 1. Genesis 1:28 is often called the cultural mandate, where in Genesis 1:27, God creates man and woman in his image after his likeness to be like a mirror to reflect his glory, his character throughout the world and creation. But then Genesis 1:28, the cultural mandate, is where God commissions us to be culture makers, to co-create with him in his world. And so even as we talk a lot about faith and work and culture and vocation here at our church, but this is really wrapped up in this cultural mandate of we're sitting in this room at a table.
Right.
And our microphones are on the table where God could have made this table in Genesis 1, but he didn't. He put all of the potential for this table to be made.
Right.
And then in the cultural mandate of Genesis 1:28 says, hey, you as my image bearer, this is a way that you will reflect my character in the world, is by co-creating, go create that table, right? Go create whatever it is. And so we see that wrapped up into our identity as being an image bearer, we are all creative because we're made in the image of a creative God. And so art matters because God is the original artist.
Wow. And, you know, before we actually started this episode today, we were talking about a place where where the Holy Spirit first fills someone, right? It's in an interesting place, right? Maybe when we think about the filling of the Holy Spirit, our mind goes to like, oh, maybe it's going to be an evangelistic sort of moment or some sort of spiritual gift being like tongues or something like that happening, but it actually doesn't show up there, right? Like we actually see the first person who is filled with the Holy Spirit is an artist.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit, John. Yeah. Tease that out. Like, who was it? What was the situation?
Yeah. So in Exodus 31, for the tabernacle, the place in which God's very presence would dwell amongst his people, we see Bezalel and Oholiab. I think that's how you say their names. I don't know.
I just call them Belz, but
I've never met any little kids running around our church with those names, so I might be butchering the name. But in Exodus 31, what we see is God empowers these two people with his Holy Spirit. It's the first time in the Bible we see this language of being filled with the Holy Spirit. And it's not for the purpose of evangelism.
Right.
It's not an Acts, Acts chapter 2 type of deal, which we often think, at Pentecost, the Holy Spirit comes. But actually, God fills these people with his Spirit for the purpose of doing art, fashioning and forming his tabernacle. And so it's interesting because God is very much concerned with the beauty of this place.
Yes.
And oftentimes when we think through art, you can think about the functionality of, how does this function? The tabernacle had the function of being the place where God's presence was, but God was very concerned with beauty. And so what I'd love, Autumn, if you'd speak to just on the beauty of art and God caring about beauty.
Yeah. Well, I think specifically for that example, I think that God is honored by the time and the attention and the effort that those artists put into it. You know, if it was, like Warren said, just like a, you know, stake slapped on the ground and that was it, there's not as much, like intention, and it's less of a like holy place where people come to and to see God and to see representation of how beautiful He is and how much creativity He's given us. So I think that when it comes to the way something looks, it doesn't have to just be beautiful for beautiful sake, but in that particular moment, it was reflecting the intricacies of who God is and how those artists were, just honoring God, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
And Autumn, you've done a good job, even around here. Like, to be honest, I'm an artist, but if I'm being honest, sometimes my mind goes more to function.
Sure. Yeah.
Actual trying to create things that inspire beauty. How do you help people like even think through that?
Well, okay, so I think function's really important too, right? So, you can't have something that functions well but is ugly, or if you have something that's beautiful but doesn't function well, then like what's the point of having it? So marrying form and function, I think, is really important.
Oh, that's good.
I think that something that God's been developing in me lately is being able to like look at stuff and see, okay, so that works well, but can we make it prettier? Like even just, this is kind of one example of what the comm team has done here recently is we have this little hallway in the sanctuary where people go to receive prayer at the end of the service. And there was just this moment where like, it's kind of like dark and scary down there. We were like, do people feel like worried to go and receive prayer? And so all of us just kind of realized at the same time, like, how can we bring the form up to match the function of this space? And so if you attend the service and receive prayer, you'll notice that hallway is now lit. There's some artwork on the walls, and we're just wanting to make it a more inviting space so that the like people's emotions can feel safe there.
Yeah, and I have really appreciated the ways that you've helped us as a church to like appreciate the form and not just the function. I think that was definitely a growth space for us as a church. And as Autumn mentioned, I just have to do this because I'm a dad and I have to do these dad jokes now. the prayer hallway is lit, all right?
It's
lit. It's lit. It's lit.
Thank you. It had to be said.
It just had to be said. I have to do it. Sorry, guys. So now we have this biblical vision of art, right? But the reality is that a lot of times in the history of church or just in Christian culture, we haven't seen this sort of appreciation of art, right? There are a lot of people over in history who have just said, like, what's the point? Like, art is just frivolous use of our resources. Like, why we don't need to spend time on that. It's all about just how we worship God. Like, we don't need to pretty it up, or as my friend Stephen Collins says, we don't need to get cute with it. We just need to just do things as straight and function and formless as possible, as long as it serves a function. And so. Yeah, why would, maybe answer the critic, answer the cynic who says, like, why do we need to spend money on paintings? Why is that important?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, first I would say that art satisfies a deep longing within every single human for beauty. That every one of us has a longing for beauty that art oftentimes will satisfy. Art has the ability to communicate profound truth about the world and the reality in which we live, not just spiritually, but also physically, socially, emotionally. Art communicates the truth of that. But also, because of that, God actually can use art to awaken and arouse within people the desire for a better world.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me if I can evangelize through art, I just like my evangelizing just isn't just screaming out, hey, this is the gospel, or like there's actually a way that art can be used to evangelize?
There is.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, tell me more.
And even if you don't use art for the purpose of evangelism, it still has intrinsic value. Because God is the artist, right?
That's so good.
But you get into this, like, God uses art to awaken and arouse this desire within people for a better world. It gives us a glimpse of the beauty of his kingdom and what we know of the kingdom will one day be here. And so art has the ability to connect. Oftentimes, like, even for myself, there's times where I'll reflect on a piece of art and it stirs within me something, an emotion that maybe I didn't have language for. right? Because I connect with it in a way. And so I think, hey, art being something frivolous, I think it's actually one of the ways in which people deeply connect with maybe a deep longing that they don't even have words to speak to. I'd love to hear, Autumn.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There's so much more that can be conveyed with color and brushstrokes than maybe even can be spoken with words.
Wow.
And then too, Warren, like I think with music, like, I mean, I don't think anyone could argue that music can stir up emotions in you that you didn't even know you had. Like how many times have we walked into this sanctuary and we're like, I'm good, and then just that song comes on. You know that
and you're
song.
A puddle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've broken down in this building so many times just because there's something about lifting your voice and hearing multiple musicians playing their instruments at the same time that like just it like opens something up in your heart that you wouldn't be able to do if you're just sitting and talking to somebody. Like there's so art in music form can absolutely do that. And I don't know how often people go sit at galleries, but I mean, if you're sitting at an art gallery, artists have certain intentions behind things that they make, but that multiple people could look at the same piece of art and it could awaken something different in them as well.
Man. Yeah. We recently, if you're around Redemption Tempe, maybe you've heard of the creative cohort that John and I were leading up, and one of the things that we did, I think it was during the second week of the cohort, was a spiritual practice around just looking at art. And it was honestly one of the most prayerful and just spirit-filled experiences as people looked at a image, a painting of the prodigal son, and they were just drawing out all these different things that reminded them of how God embraces them, and just all sorts of different reflections that were coming out and discussions that were coming out of that. And it was like, wow, like art serves such a deep sort of purpose and can open up a deep sort of well within us that we wouldn't even know was there, right? Like we can, it's way beyond, it's way beyond like just a function sort of thing. It's way beyond that. It's like art. We were created to respond to art.
Yeah. I think too that like art can remind us of certain things. So like, if you're going through a difficult season and you like kind of keep coming back to an image in your mind, and then, say you're able to then paint that image or something that reminds you of that. Every time you see that, you can be reminded of how God was faithful.
Yes.
Like I know that a lot of people will do kind of, I don't know what it's called, but like prayers where you're asking God to give you certain images in your mind. Is that
like listening prayer?
Something like that.
Sure.
And so a lot of times I think that we're so busy and we tend to forget, I think, but if you can have something concrete that you can look at to remind yourself of that, then that's wonderful,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say too, just on the, going back to the frivolous question, I think that's a really, really important question. And I'd love to just chat for a minute on this too, because I think the reason why it's not frivolous for Christians to engage in art or care about art is because art shapes culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
And culture makers are artists. I mean, if we just look around, like everything from music to film to fashion, like the people that are on the forefront of shaping society, shaping people's worldviews even, are artists.
Right. Yeah.
And so what oftentimes happens in art currently, what happens in art today, will actually take place in society or the broader culture tomorrow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So where have you guys seen that? For me, where it stands out is fashion, where it's like, do you see some wild new fashion trends and you're like, dude, no one is ever going to wear that, right? Some dude's wearing overalls, and then all of a sudden, 6 months later at the church, a dude shows up wearing overalls. It's like...
No, for sure, sure. Man, I think of... So I love hip-hop, right? And so it's like probably my favorite genre of music, and I just think about how there was a shift within hip-hop where at one point it was like, everyone was trying to be like the hardest, the toughest guy, and then all of a sudden, like, artists started to tap into their emotional state way more. And then you start to see people actually making that shift too. Like they were actually asking questions about their emotions, asking questions about like mental health, wanting to dig into that. And, music was communicating that even before we saw the big shift within our culture. And so,
well, to that point, it's, if you think about, so if you're an artist and you're doing what you do really well, then you're going to have lots of people see what you're doing. And then they're going to want to mimic that, right? So like, especially with the music industry, like if you are making music that isn't great, no one's going to watch and listen to you. And, so in the same way, like if we are fulfilling our call to be artists or like, just trying to do our best and be really good at what we do, then people will see and mimic the beauty in that. I think about like, I don't know how in tune you guys are with like the color palettes that are popular right now, but if you look anywhere on Instagram, color palettes.
Tell us. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, I don't know. On social media and everything, suddenly over the last like year or so, there's been a lot more like kind of like rusty orange colors and pinks. Things that people find cool. Like that's
influencers are rocking those. Yes.
And to be like totally honest, like a year or two ago when that first started coming out, I was like, I hate that rust color. It's hideous. And then after seeing it so much, I'm like, oh, I kind of love that.
You love it.
That's great. Yeah. It's like John's beard color. If you had to like envision what I'm talking about.
John is probably the most fashionable.
Yeah.
So it
he started it, let's be honest.
He'd be ahead.
People are going to be going to the paint swatch asking for my beard color.
Exactly. But yeah, like just to the point of what you see frequently, you mimic then too.
Yes. Yeah. And it shapes you, right?
It shapes you.
You're like, oh, that was ugly. And now it's like, no, actually, I want that in my house.
Yeah, or like hairstyles, like the whole half up top knot situation and the bottom half of your hair down. Like I used to think that looked really not great. And now I'm like, that's so cute.
Yeah, see, Jim was always making fun of my Turkish women's pants.
I know.
He always made fun of my pants. My jogger pants, he said, looked like Turkish women's pants, and then everybody started wearing them. I was like, see?
I think the moral of the story is John is at the forefront of all fashion.
We just need to be tapped into John so we can know what's coming.
And the brunt of all jokes.
Yes.
That too.
So there's that approach. There's that negativity maybe around art where it's like, oh, like what's the purpose of it? There's like that end of it. And then there's like the other end of it, right? Where it's like there are dangers maybe that artists encounter, especially as they're trying to figure out how their creativity and faith intersect. There are certain dangers that can arise there as well. What are some of the ways that you see maybe art has become idolatrous at Redemption Tempe or somewhere else? Yeah.
I think for me, the main thing I think about when I think of art and idolatry going hand in hand is how we begin to equate our worth with the product that we're able to create. So if you're an artist, how good you are of an artist is how much you feel like you're worth.
Ooh, speaking of my soul right there.
Yeah, and I think probably everybody, if you're an artist or not, experiences some of that. Like whether it's just whatever your job is, however good you're doing at it at the time is how valuable you feel. But I think that we are not the product we produce, and there's something just intrinsically beautiful about the creating of it and not just like that end product. And so again, God creates and gives us that desire to create. So if we're less focused on like the end product and more on like the process.
Yes.
That was a little bit of a tangent, but
no, for sure. I think what you're saying is very true. It relates to what it's on. Like we can take art, which is a good thing, and make it the ultimate thing.
Yeah, right. Just your identity as an artist can be the idol, not even just the art itself.
Yeah, I've done hip hop for many years, and so one of the things when I first got to Redemption Tempe, I was that annoying guy who was like sending his songs around to everyone, and telling them to share it and stuff like that. And one of I sent it to our former lead pastor. When I sent one of my songs to our former lead pastor, Ricardo Stewart, and I remember he responded to me. He was like, "This is good. This is really good, but make sure your identity's not tied up in it." And I was rocked. I was like, "What? Yeah. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
But he was, that's tends to what happens to artists, right?
Yeah.
We fall in love with our art so much that it becomes the completeness of our identity, and there's just so many problems that stem from that. So that's definitely one area there. John. There's too many J's here at Redemption Tempe. John, a lot of times we see the tendency of artists to deconstruct, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because art does, a lot of times, like challenge the societal norms and stuff like that. And it can lead to a place of like deconstruction. And we can see that happen within artists with their faith as well. Can you speak to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a danger just right now in society.
Yeah.
But then also artists are really prone to it. And it's coming from postmodernism, which we're not going to get in the weeds of that on this podcast. But essentially, postmodernism is just, in art, there are no absolutes and there is no truth. And that is the antithesis to what we know about God and his beauty and his character. God actually has standards and absolutes. And I would say good art should mirror God's character and standards for Christians. And his standards are goodness, truth, beauty, meaning that a lot of times you get wrapped up into the postmodern narrative of, well, there is no truth, there are no absolutes, and then even what is art? Like you can all of a sudden start to say anything is art. And it's like, well, that's also not it either. That's postmodernism saying anything can be art.
Yeah.
That's not always the case. And so I think if you embrace that, and it's through music, it's through visual, all of that, it then can lead to what you're saying, which we've seen happen, sadly, where all of a sudden it's
community.
like I'm deconstructing a worldview, I'm deconstructing art, I'm deconstructing all these things, and I'm also deconstructing my faith.
Yes.
Where you start to ask these really hard questions to essentially try to tear down your faith and rebuild it. The sad thing is, people aren't rebuilding it with anything substantive, good, true, beautiful. Instead, it's coming to this place where many people are walking away from Jesus because they're wrapped up in postmodernism. And one of the main ways that postmodernism has become accessible is through art. Because it actually started in the academy, but most of us have no idea those academic conversations. But all of a sudden, it's that song. And that song is drilling at postmodernism, and it's drilling at questioning and deconstructing, and there are no absolutes, and yada, yada, yada.
Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you start to, just like with the paint colors that Autumn was talking about, you start to be shaped by it, right?
Sure.
I think that's a danger for sure.
That was great, man. Is there any other ways you guys can think about, specifically in Redemption Tempe, that you've seen art maybe, become an idol?
Ooh, I think if we can broaden the scope of art to just like how we look and what we do, like I think that our church has our church for the last 10 years or so has kind of been like the cool church in quotation marks. And so I think that if we just kind of continue to live into like our own coolness and our image, that can absolutely become an idol in a in a bad way. I mean, not that an idol is a good thing ever, but
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think our church is this way anymore.
Yeah, we're less cool. We're now old moms.
We've all gotten old. We all got kids and stuff. But when I first walked into Redemption Tempe, I was like, man, I think I need to hit up H&M and Urban Outfitters because I'm not up to par. My wardrobe's not up to par with what the group is, what's going on here. And so I don't think we are that way anymore. But it is something to be careful of, right? Like we don't want to create an in group within church that says you have to, the only way you could be a part of this group, really be connected to this group is if you look this way, you're interested in these things. It's like, no, our in group is like we love and are being discipled by Jesus. That's the in group. And so
it's like, what's the tension between like doing what you do well and like looking good and making things look good, but also being accessible to somebody who's not like there yet. So like, that doesn't mean you have to go dress really grungy if that's not your style, but like, how do we still be welcoming and accessible to somebody who might not have all the brands?
That's not the thing, for sure. Yeah. That's so good. So good.
Yeah.
All right, so John, you kind of touched on this, and I think it'd just be really interesting to have this conversation because you hang around Redemption Tempe, you hear us say all of life is all for Jesus, right? Like that is the call of our church, right? That's how we are wanted to disciple and lead folks is to think of the gospel's implications on every area of their life. And so, but when it comes to art, right? Like, are there, like, where does that, what are the artistic forms that we cannot affirm, right? Like, what are the artistic forms that we would say, like, the gospel, there's no way that it can actually affirm these things because affirm this type of art because it is completely broken and Yeah. So, what are some of those artistic forms that you would say fall beyond we can redeem this if we do it this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can affirm the creational good of art, but as we know, come Genesis 3, the rebellion happens, and now sin has radically distorted all of creation.
Yeah,
meaning art. And art is now distorted, and some art forms and some types of art are the full distortion of sin, right? Where we would say God calls us as artists, vocationally, right? But there are also some things that God doesn't call us to because they are inherently sinful. And so when you look at, once again, going back to what we were saying about God has standards, goodness, truth, and beauty, art forms that are the antithesis to goodness, truth, and beauty, that are sinful, are things that we would say, like, we should not be engaging in. And so you look at art that has pornography in it, specifically, right? Where pornography in and of itself is a distortion of, once again, something good, right? God created human sexuality. Sex is a good gift from God between a man and a woman in a monogamous marriage.
Right.
And so art now that takes that sinful distortion of sex and now magnifies it, that would be something where we as followers of Jesus would say, hey, this is sinful, this is a distortion, and so we need to actually critique that, right? We need to, the gospel critiques and challenges the way that this sin has distorted this thing in art. And so I would say art that is inherently pornographic, has pornography involved in it, would be one thing that we would say, hey, we would reject that. Yeah.
You know, and I 100% agree. And I think for a lot of us, we kind of feel that. But like one of those things, one of the areas we miss, I think, especially in our American Hollywood sort of culture, like, is violence, right? Like, what about those films where limbs are being torn from piece to piece? And, you know, what do you like? Is that an okay form of art for us to look at? Is that a okay form of art for us to engage in? Is that a good expression? Like,
Autumn,
what do you guys think about that?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to let you take that one, John.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when you go back to, once again, that art communicates truth and reality about the world, that there are certain things with violence that I think art could really communicate the deep longing, right? And so I wouldn't say, with like pornography, I would say, hey, that's something that pornographic art is something that we would reject. I think it is something that we should be critical of, though. Maybe not completely say, hey, Christians can't engage in that, depending on what it's depicting. But I do think in America, we have an obsession with violence. And I do think we should be asking the question, as followers of Jesus, how is this a distortion of creational good? How should we engage with this if it's excessively violent? Those sort of things. I think it's a question we should be asking for sure.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think I've been personally convicted of this on a couple of fronts. One is like video games, right? Like, I've really enjoyed playing, you know, some of the shooter games or whatever, you know, it may be. And then you're playing those games, and then you have a moment and like, I am literally, I'm playing a game where I'm killing people.
Wow.
What is this doing for me? What is this doing to me?
Our podcast turned into your confession time, dude. Warren's confessing.
Well, actually, I don't have any systems now, but I've enjoyed those games in the past, all right? Guys, come on. No, but like, yeah, so like you have that. And then also, I mean, if I'm being honest, I like true crime podcasts.
Yeah.
Right? And the true crime is like a very popular thing right now. And it's an art form of like storytelling. But sometimes as I'm listening to the stories, I'm thinking like I am consuming like the death and pain and
the darkest things.
The darkest things that somebody has gone through, and I'm just consuming it on my way to to work or something. You know?
Where you work at a church.
It definitely. I think what you said, John, is so true. Like, we should be critical at least to think, okay, what is this doing? What are we doing? How is this shaping and informing us?
Yeah, it should be on our radar rather than blindly consuming. Because I think in a consumeristic society too, I think we blindly consume without ever even asking the question.
Right.
It's like, this is so familiar and it's all around. And I think we do that with the types of film we watch, you know, and then if you say, I'm not sure if I want to watch that, all of a sudden you're like, dude, are you some sort of fundamentalist? You know, like you don't watch movies like that. It's like, well, you know, I think we should be wrestling.
Absolutely.
And some of it is what I would say, it's a conscience issue of maybe for one Christian, your brother or sister, they're like, hey, that's a stumbling block.
Right.
I think we've got to honor that and say, okay, well, hey, let's not put the stumbling block there. And maybe for someone else, they're able to engage with something that is violent for a different reason and say, hey, it's not a stumbling block, but it actually helps me feel the emotion of brokenness that makes me long for the kingdom, right? But I think it should be on our radar.
No, that's so good. And I think sometimes, like you said, our tendency when someone's like is critical about something that we enjoy, especially like, you know, I'm sure you guys can think of all those shows on Netflix that you watch. You're like, should I really, you know, be engaged? When someone brings that up, though, a lot of times where our tendency is like, no, like you're just being fundamentalist. Like, no, you're just a weird Christian. It's like, no, there are definitely ways that like certain forms of the sin and the way it's displayed affects people and impacts them deeply, and we should be conscious of that and not encourage them to partake in it just because, you know, we don't want to feel guilty that we're watching it too. And so yeah, that's so good.
I wonder too if the tendency to feel defensive if somebody asks you that makes you want to then double down and just be like, no, it's fine. But that probably should push us to more of a posture of humility of being like, okay, what am I, why am I digging in?
Yes.
Like maybe it really is an area of sin that I am not ready to give up yet or something.
That's so good.
One thing I was thinking about when you were talking about that, just the movies being violent, is having a like young kid now. I have a almost 5-year-old little boy, and that's kind of reframed for me a lot. We'll even watch some, you know, original Disney movies, and they're, you know, still decently violent, and I'll have to explain those things to him. And it's hard to explain to him in a way that isn't like condoning what they're doing. So yeah, I think just having that perspective of like, how would I explain this to my child? It just makes you think. Yeah.
So good. I have a couple more questions before we wrap up, and I didn't hit on this, and I wanted to hit on this earlier. There can also be the approach to art within the church that of like, as long as I'm doing it for God, it's good. Like it doesn't need to fit any sort of standard of excellence.
Like it can be terrible.
Yeah, but it has a cross on it. So it's okay.
Talk to that. Let's have that discussion because, like I said, I've done hip hop. I've done Christian hip hop, and I don't want to shame the entire genre of change. But
I want to hear this.
There have just been some songs that I'm like, man, yes, you love the Lord, and I'm so happy you love the Lord, and it's great. But this song is terrible.
Yeah.
And some people will be like, well, no, it can't be terrible because the gospel's being proclaimed, right?
Yeah.
Jesus is being exalted in this song. How can you call it terrible?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure in your various art forums or the things you enjoy, you've seen like, hey, this is Christian, so it's good. Like, talk to that. Speak to that.
I want to hear from Autumn.
Yeah, Autumn.
But when you say that, just the absurdity of that. In any other vocation, and even mine as an artist, it is unacceptable for me to say, I'm going to do a terrible haircut, but because I'm going to tell you about Jesus, you're going to have a jacked up haircut, and it's going to be somehow
put
okay.
a cross in your head.
Like that doesn't fly in any other realm of work, vocation, anything like that. But I'd love to hear.
Well, okay, so I think that like quality is quality, right? So like whatever umbrella it falls under, if it's secular or Christian, like you know quality when you see it. And so I think that like we as artists in whatever, you know, whatever your specific discipline is, you should strive to be the best of that discipline.
Absolutely.
And again, not for our own glory. And that's the tension, right? Like I want to be the best. And a lot of times it's like, oh, because I want to be the best. But no, it's like, I would love to be in a position where more people can maybe see my Instagram page and then see that like I am talking about God on my page. So, you know, of course, several weeks ago, Jake preached on, you know,
human approval.
Like human approval. And so that's the tension for all of us. But yeah, I think that to strive to honor God by doing your very best is like everything.
Absolutely.
And there's also, of course, there's something we said for like, you might be an artist and you might not be that great of an artist yet. And that's okay, but you're trying your best.
Exactly.
You know, like if you're going to stop on a project before you really think it's great, because you're like, oh, well, it's just for a church.
Right.
It's okay. I don't think that's honoring to God.
That's so good. I've always wondered, like, if we're doing it, if we're saying we're doing it for God, why wouldn't we want to give him our best?
Totally.
Yeah. We should, as Christians, be the best artists.
Right.
We should actually have the most excellence.
Yeah.
Not for the purpose of saying we're better than other people, but we believe that we reflect the supreme artist. And he has made us to reflect him. Do we want to reflect him well?
Yeah, totally.
Or do we want to do a very poor job of reflecting him?
Yes.
And I think because of that alone, there is a call for us to pursue excellence because we are reflecting him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And even within the whole, I can do bad art if it's evangelistic. It's not evangelistic if it's bad. No one wants to see it or hear it. But I would say by pursuing excellence, it's actually more evangelistic.
Right.
Because even with the all of life interviews we do, if you even take that first question of how does your work as an artist reflect the character of God, we're reflecting the character of God by having excellence in our creativity. And I would say it is overtly evangelistic to excel in your artistry, to excel in whatever line, whether it's a hobby, whether it's your vocation that you do as an occupation, whatever it may be. Excellence for a Christian is very, very important, I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we saw, as we talked about earlier in Exodus 31, right? Like God just didn't put together a couple of sticks to call his home, where he would choose to actually reside. Like he had a lot of intention and beauty and form in what he was doing. It wasn't just like, well, this is for me, so it can just look like anything. There's there's a certain way I want this to be designed. I want this to be excellently done. The model's been set for us, so that's good. I know there's a lot of people who groan when they hear about a Christian movie. They're like, it's terrible.
Hey, I'm in that camp.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And so, brothers and sisters, let's do better. And so, lastly today, we always want to imagine, what will things look like in the new heavens and new earth. And we get some glimpses of that in Scripture of what heavens looks like, and we see a lot of actually beauty displayed in heaven. What do you guys? What would you imagine heaven looking like when it comes to art and creativity?
John, you want to start with that one?
Yeah. So what I love is if you go back to Genesis 1, the cultural mandate that we began this podcast with, it's given in a garden. Yeah. But what we see in Revelation when heaven comes down to be reconciled, heaven and earth are one, and God's kingdom is fully restored, it's not a garden. It's a city. And so you see this progression through the biblical story from a garden to a city. And what that means is that the city, God is going to keep, he's going to maintain the best cultural developments, the best in art, the best in all of these, the cultural mandate of us cultivating and being co-creators with him. He's going to maintain the best of all of our developments, the best of all of our co-creating with him. Sin will not be present, and so all of the distortions will be gone. Right. But the very best of, he's going to keep the integrity of our co-creation, which means God values it. Yeah. There's going to be beauty there. Heaven is not going to be us sitting on a cloud, playing a harp, wearing a diaper, right? That's not it.
Thanks for clearing that.
It is going to be beautiful, and there will be beautiful pieces of art, and there will be multiple forms of art, right? Like God, his kingdom will be fully realized here. And even going back to the language of us saying, art awakens in us, this desire for beauty, this longing for what the world, a better world, a longing for the kingdom, we're actually going to see the fulfillment of that longing. And once again, if we are saying that God is the supreme artist, we're going to be living in his presence, in his kingdom. It's going to be beautiful, right? It's going to be beautiful.
When I envision just what the new heavens and the new earth are going to look like, I think about the people that are going to be in it and how we will all be able to experience making art ourselves. Like there's some forms of art that I'm not good at that I'd like to be better at. And so I just wonder if will I get to sing more beautifully in heaven, or will I get to throw pots and, which is creating pots for those of you who don't know.
Gotcha.
But so I just wonder if we'll all be able to worship in ways that we weren't able to worship here on earth. If you are embarrassed about your drawing abilities here on earth, I wonder if in the new heaven you will be able to draw beautifully and it'll be satisfying to you and God,
Yeah, that's so good.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah. My hope is I would be able to at least be at your level of handwriting.
At least. You're just going to pass me. Yeah.
No, guys, it's we long for the new heavens and new earth where, we'll see art displayed to its fullest quality, right? We'll get the best songs,
yeah.
the best portraits. We'll, get the best hand lettering and the best haircuts and all the different art forms that we get a glimpse of here. We'll see in their fullest capacity in the new heavens and new earth. And so,
one other thing, just a thought of the restoration of, and we didn't mention it here, but just we are God's. Not only are we His co-creator, but we are actually His pieces of art.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Ephesians 2, right? We are His workmanship. We are His poem. And we show and demonstrate the beauty of His redemption. Right. And so we're all going to be there. And so you almost think of this beautiful mosaic of every tribe, every tongue, every people that are gathered together. Dude, that's an art piece.
That's an art piece.
That's a masterpiece.
Greatest portrait ever.
And so we're not all the same, but we're all one.
Yeah,
right.
Totally. I even think about just that of new heavens of
absolutely.
We are His art. You know?
So folks, we long for that day. We hope for that day. And until then, I encourage you artists or creators who are listening, let's continue to give good glimpses of that, the beauty and excellence of God through our art and our creativity. And it just, with everything that we talked about today, art is so important. And as a church, I know it's something that we just want to continue to help you think about and shape and help you to hopefully continue to create great art. And so, guys, I want to thank you, John, Autumn. You guys rocked it today.
Autumn's the real rock star. Autumn's the real rock star.
Yeah, for sure. And we thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of the All of Life podcast. To get more information on Redemption Church Tempe, you can download the Redemption Tempe app, or you can send an email to tempe@redemptionaz.com.